And the psychology behind it was that you learn independence. And, it's almost easy. If you've got these loving, fabulous parents who, hopefully, many people have got, you're not as independent, whereas, if you lose a parent young, you end up sort of doing things for yourself a little bit earlier. And so maybe that going back to that responsibility, the ownership piece, and having to sort yourself out, and, means that people learn some of the skills which enable their talent to then be used differently in the future. But there is a direct correlation, believe it or not. I wish I could tell you the real psychology in the actual article and the actual piece in the book. But you just reminded me when you're talking about it. So I do think that some people do have these extreme experiences. And I think that it's almost easier to get to know ourselves and get to think about life and contextualize things, if we're experiencing things which are outside of our our normal field of vision.
I resonate a lot with that. You said, lose a parent, but the reason I resonated with that is because I've said multiple times on this podcast again, that when people have asked me why I was successful, I cite that when I was younger, my parents weren't ever in the house, and that meant that I had to find a way to make money to feed myself. Or, my mum was never in the house when I went to bed, and she was never there when I woke up because she slept at her shop sometimes. And my dad worked in London for 6 days a week, which was 4 hours away. And it was only of the four of us in my family, the four siblings. That wasn't the case for my older siblings. When they were younger, or when they were my age, my mum and dad were in the house every day doing date nights together. And then when I grew up, by the age of 10, I could leave the house for 3 days or 2 days, and they wouldn't actually know that I'd gone.
Right.
And so that meant that I became like this sort of self-autonomous kid at 12, 13, 14, 15, and then started businesses at 14, and then, went off.
But you could have gone the other way as well, couldn't you?
Oh, 100%.
With that level of freedom and autonomy, but not the maturity and to deal with that freedom.
My best friend said to me, when I'll never forget where I stood when he said it in this takeaway shop, he said, "Stephen, you're either going to be a criminal or a millionaire." And it was because I had that. My independence created this connection where I knew that my outcomes were going to be a direct result of my behavior. I always think of like school dinners as the perfect example. For a lot of my childhood, maybe up until the age of about 9, there was always like £2 on the counter, which was like, okay, you take that to school. And then by 10, the £2 wasn't there anymore. So it was like waking up in the morning and being like, how am I going to eat today? I'd have to find a way. So I'd go and sell cigarettes. Or, I knew that there were cigarettes in this room upstairs, which my mum had got from Nigeria one year. So I just went to school and I was just shopping the cigarettes or chewing gum. And it was that connection I made super early that my outcomes are a direct and only correlation of sort of connected to my behavior. So I resonate with that a lot. And it kind of explains the difference between 4 kids that grew up in the same household and 3 of them went to university, LSE, Cambridge, whatever, and one of them dropped out of everything, got kicked out of school and became an entrepreneur. You know what I mean?
It's true, isn't it? It's just like, so it's not necessarily the experience, it's how we translate that experience and how we channel our feeling into something which could be productive or destructive. You could have become a criminal and a millionaire and got a job with this Tory government. You could be a front bench MP with those credentials, couldn't you?
There's still time.
I'm a millionaire and a criminal.
There's still a lot of time.
Yeah.
But the last thing I really wanted to ask you about was, this idea of distractions. Social media has made it incredibly easy to distract ourselves. And you see, teams becoming much more distracted at work because of all these screens and, the digitalization of the world, and individuals. And what's your thoughts on why we're so distracted and how to overcome it?
Yeah, it's true that we are distracted. I think focus and concentration have to be practiced. So many things can be improved. So whether it's resilience, whether it's concentration, whether it's courage, all these things can be practiced. So many think courage, for example, I always think courage is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. So it's possible to exercise all these things and be better at them. And I think that it's fine to be distracted because it's actually quite nice to have different stimuli and different provocation. And so we just need to choose when it's good to have that provocation and change, and when we need to concentrate, and we need to practice both. Now, here's a thing for you, is that as human beings, we don't multitask. So multitasking is a lie. So for all the all the girls and all the women watching this or listening to this, I'm sorry to tell you, it's not true. You don't multitask better than men.
Amen.
It's true.
Amen.
It doesn't happen. But, we're both equally as bad. Then we're both useless at it. So what we do is we do rapid switching. So we don't multitask. We just
context switching.
Yeah, exactly. This is why actually I can't remember what it was a couple of years ago that the BlackBerry network went down in Abu Dhabi for a weekend from Friday to Monday. We had a 48% decrease in car accidents that weekend.
Really?
Because
Wow.
as human beings, we don't multitask. You don't sort of like check your text and drive well. It doesn't work as a human being. So I think that we are living in an age where it's easy to be distracted, and some of these distractions are incredibly useful. We need to come back to greater responsibility and choice. And let's choose when it's fine to do that and when it's fine not to be. And practice these levels of concentration and focus that we may need for certain tasks, but we may not for another. So I quite like times when I can sit down and read a book or absorb something or think about something and narrow my focus. Sometimes I quite like sort of TV being on, music being on, at phone next to me on the computer, because actually I'm sometimes picking up on certain things which for a level of creativity can be quite useful. At a bit of provocation, a bit of changeability in my thinking, because I get distracted by something and come back to it.
I find that as well. I find for some bizarre reason, if I go for a walk or if I go to the gym, inspiration floods into me. But when I'm sat in my office trying to think of stuff, it's almost impossible. The shower is another weird place where my ideas seem to show up all at once. And it's like, I'm not like, this isn't hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating at all. Like if I'm sat here and I'm trying to think of something to write or whatever, I go for a walk and then sometimes I put my music in. It's like non-stop. And I find that quite, interesting, because teams are often trying to think of ideas and creativity. And
if you say to people, where do you have your best ideas? And ask people that question, where do you have your best ideas? Do you know what they'll say? When I'm walking the dog, and when I'm in the shower, just about to fall off to sleep, on the commute, over breakfast, they'll come up with all recreational drugs. They'll come up with all sorts of stuff.